The scripture lesson today comes from the book of Genesis 27, 1 through 4, 15 through 23, and chapter 28, 10 through 17. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man, and do not know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me so that I may eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. Then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. He went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of your game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not." Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. Jacob left Beersheba and went out to Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to the heaven, and then the angel of God ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are laying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I've done what I have promised you." When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Throughout this part of the book of Genesis, Jacob is not described as being the best character in the world. He twice cheats his brother Esau. He's actually called Jacob because he is one who is a trickster. That's what his name means. He is somebody who is always being deceitful, who is always lying, who's always cheating. And so we have a problem, I think, as Christians, as we read through this at certain points. When we ask ourselves, is it right that God chooses this man, Jacob? Is it right that he's able to steal the blessing of his brother and become God's chosen vehicle for God's blessing to come into this world through dishonesty? What do we as Christians do with that truth and that reality? It's hard for us to balance that moral idea. And so we have some wrestling that we have to do, especially as we deal with the rest of this story. Jacob has already by this point stolen Esau's birthright. And stolen is a little bit of a hard word because Esau gave it to him freely. We're told earlier in the chapter that Esau came into the house absolutely famished. And I think oftentimes we see this as being a little trivial, but I'm taking it to be crawling on the ground, cannot move any further, famished. And he says, "Jacob, please give me some of that food that you're making." And Jacob says, "I'll give you food, sure, for your birthright." And Esau, who is so weak and so hungry, says, "Yes, you can have my birthright for a bowl of bean soup." It's wild. And here in this account, we have the second part that Jacob has already gotten the birthright, but now he wants Esau's blessing. Now, what is the difference between these two things? So the birthright is the eldest son typically gets a double portion share of the inheritance. So when the father dies, if there are two sons, the estate is divided in three. And then the oldest son gets 2 portions and the youngest son gets 1 portion. It's how the culture worked at the time. And the birthright isn't giving up everything that would go to Esau. Instead, it's the idea that Jacob is now going to be the receiver of the double portion that would have been Esau's. But now we have to this whole blessing thing, which isn't something that really exists in our culture. And so I think we need a little bit of an analogy to break down exactly what's happening here. I want you to imagine that a man named Frank Smith, has set up a plumbing business, and he is just a lifelong plumber. And Frank has 2 sons. Frank has built up a wonderful business. Everyone in the community knows of Frank. They know his business, and they know that when your plumbing needs fixed, you call Frank. Well, Frank has come to the age where he's retired. He's about to step down from the business and pass it on to his sons. And one son wants to go one way and the other son wants to go another way. The birthright is like the tools, the equipment, maybe the van that drives around to each location to fix up the plumbing. That's the birthright, the stuff that you need to do the job. But the blessing is like the family name. It's that Frank's Plumbing that you get to put on the front of the building, on your business cards, on the side of the van. The thing that everybody knows and associates with the good name of Frank's Plumbing. Now, if one son received just the birthright, he could start a plumbing business, sure. He could do that, but he wouldn't have any clients. He wouldn't have a reputation of having a good business. In order to get that, he needs the blessing. And that's where Jacob finds himself in this story. He's got the stuff, but with it comes just stuff. The blessing is what takes it to that next level, that thing that gives it so that your existence in the world and in honor shame society is justified. You are serving in your father's role. He's placed you there as his beloved son. And so the story starts out, Isaac calls to Esau and says, Esau, come here, my son. And here we hear a little bit of an echo as Esau says, here I am. The same words last week that Abraham said to God. Remember, in the binding of Isaac, Abraham, and Abraham replied, here I am. And it almost sets us up to see Esau as being the holy person in this story. The one who dutifully answers to his father's call to say, here I am, ready to serve. What do you need? It only continues to build Esau as being this just wonderful man. And so Isaac says, Esau, I'm getting close to death. I don't know how much longer I have. What I want you to do is to go out into the wild and hunt me some wild game and bring it back and make the most wonderful meal. You know how I like it, Esau. You know exactly what I like. Make that and I will give you my blessing. It kind of gives us this image of an Isaac who's even too weak to give a blessing and needs to fill himself just to be able to get enough strength to arouse himself to bless his son. This Isaac is close to death. Esau goes out, takes his quiver and bow because he is a great hunter. And in the meantime, Rebekah gets together her son Jacob and puts him into Esau's clothes, covers his arms with fur because we're told specifically Esau's a hairy hairy man. I love some of the images that you see of the two, and Esau is this big, giant man, and then Jacob is this little tiny, slender man. Puts his clothes on him, covers him with fur, gives him a meal from just one of the lambs in the field. Isaac's at the age, he doesn't even know the difference between deer and lamb. But he takes it to him and he says, Father, give me your blessing. Literally, though, and unfortunately the NIV misses this. Some other translations say, give me your innermost blessing. There's something happening here in the Hebrew that's important for us to recognize. Jacob says, here, take this, eat. Bless me with your innermost blessing. Bless me with your soul. Jacob is asking for a very specific thing to happen. That Isaac would give every bit of blessing that he possibly had to his son. And that has an implication that then there's nothing left over for Esau. All of the blessing, the entirety of Isaac's blessing is going to Jacob. Jacob is a little confused. He says, how are you back so quickly? I only just sent you out. He says, well, the Lord, your God. The Lord, your God, not my God. I know Jacob, he knows he's lying here. Your God, he gave me luck. Isaac doesn't seem really to buy. He says, well, come here. Let me touch your arm. Okay, well, it's furry. You sound like Jacob, but okay. And he gives him a hug and he smells him and he smells the farm smell on Esau's clothes. He says, okay, you must really be my son. And he just blesses him and blesses him and blesses him and pours out the fullness of the blessing. And the part that we didn't read, Esau will come in and he'll be in tears. He'll say, Father, give me some kind of blessing. And Isaac will respond. He'll say, I have no blessing left to give you. I gave all of it to Jacob. It's all gone. Jacob has successfully stolen his brother's birthright and his brother's blessing. Esau's mad. Like, I'm going to murder my brother mad. He doesn't want to do it while his dad's still living, but he's going to wait till after his dad dies. And then he's going to murder his brother. And Rebekah hatches a scheme and says, Jacob, go off to your uncle's house. Go to my brother's house and wait there. And when your brother cools down, I'll send for you and have you come back. So Jacob goes away. Ends up in indentured servitude for 14 years. That's a whole nother story, but it's a little rough. But Jacob makes off with the blessing, makes off with his life. He makes off with the birthright. As if our earthly needs were enough to consider. As Jacob is making his way to his uncle's house, he sleeps on the ground. And he sees this ladder or this stairway to heaven, and the God speaks from the top of it and says, I am going to bless you with the blessing that I promised your father and his father. You are the recipient of Abraham's blessing. Oh, I feel terrible for Esau. Why does God bless the lying, cheating, deceitful, backroom dealing Jacob? What are we supposed to do with that? I feel uneasy about that. I feel uneasy about the idea that our spiritual forefather was a liar and came upon his blessing through deceit. It almost feels like it ruins the whole thing. I wrestle with this. It's a tough concept. But this isn't a new idea in Scripture. It isn't something that only happens here. Continually, we see God working again and again and again in and through those who are of questionable value. People who are second-born, prostitutes, murderers, people who aren't Jews, people who are explicitly from nations that we are told not to even mess with, become sources of God's blessing. Then we see it again in the New Testament as Jesus is choosing those that he's going to spend time with. Sinners, prostitutes, tax collectors, fishermen, and even more murderers. Does that mean that God is just okay with this? Does it mean that God is just okay with whatever we do, whenever we do it? It's all fine. God's going to work with us anyway. No. That misses the entire point of what's being told here. The point isn't that God will work with us if we're sinful, so just keep on sinning and don't worry about it. That God will just keep working with us anyway. No, the point is instead that God will work with us even if we're sinful. So we should be more trusting in God. God presents God's self as being this source of life that is present even in the midst of the death that we create around ourselves. Jacob stole everything he had, and even his blessing belonged to another person. But even in the midst of his evil and meddling, God is committed to blessing the world in partnership with humanity. This is key. No matter what happens, no matter where we mess up, no matter when we stumble, no matter when we fall, God is committed to redeeming humanity in partnership with humanity. That shouldn't put us in a mindset that we can just keep being broken, that we can keep hurting each other and God will sort it all out. That just causes more harm. Instead, I think what it does is it calls us as Christians not to have a mindset and to fall into the temptation that causes us to think that we are better than others because we follow God or because God seems to be working in, through, and around us. Oftentimes, Christians take a view of themselves that is much more holier than thou than it should be. One of the greatest criticisms of the church and most common criticisms is that we are hypocrites, meaning that we think about ourselves more haughtily than we should and then act in ways contrary than what we say that we should. Instead of focusing on the brokenness that we still have, we focus on what we are doing right and what others around us are doing wrong. And so this point too today should also keep us from considering anyone too broken to participate in the work that God is doing in this world. We are all part of God's plan. You and I, no matter where we are, no matter where we've been, no matter where we've come from, God has been at work in and through our lives. And so we should never look at anyone, no matter where they're at, no matter what their life looks like, no matter if they're Christian or a sinner, no matter if they are, well, I say Christian or sinner, we're all sinners. No matter if they are Christian or unbelievers, no matter if they're a churchgoer or they've never been to church, no matter what, God can and is working in and through them. And so this week I'm presenting this challenge to you. I want you to take a scrap of paper and I want you to write down the name of somebody. And maybe it's somebody who you've just had on your heart for a while. Maybe it's somebody that you marginally know. Maybe this person is the worst, no good, dog down, cheatingest, double-crossingest, backroom dealingest person that you can think of. Whoever it is. Write their name down on this piece of paper. Put it in your wallet or your purse or carry it in your pocket. Put it as a bookmark in your Bible. Hopefully you see that every day. And whenever you see it, whenever it comes to mind, pray for that person. Pray that God would be moving in and through their life. Pray that you would be seeing, that God would reveal the way that God is moving in and through their life. Pray for opportunities to be part of the way that God is working in their life. And maybe, just maybe, be part of the way that God is working in their life. Invite them into the life of this church, whether it be joining us online or joining us in person. I want you to imagine what it would look like if the entirety of the church did this. We have about 70 people who come on a Sunday morning here to the church. Several more who join us through this online platform. Imagine every one of them was praying for one person. Let's assume they're different people, but maybe not. And one of them is moved to come into the church community. Let's say that happens every month for a year. One person is moved into the life of the church. But of course, one person means one family. 3 people in a family, 2 people in a family. How long until the church doubles or triples? What if it's more than one person? What if it's 2 people a week? 3 people a month? 4 people every 2 months? Whatever. This is how the church grows and grows and grows and continues to expand its circle, welcoming more people into the life and into the work that God is accomplishing in our lives, in our church, in our community, and in the entire world. I pray that that would be true in your life and in mine.